AA for cutting off my parents after discovering they lied about needing my money? I'm Harper, 40, and for most of my adult life, being the reliable daughter meant answering my parents' calls before the second ring. I knew which cabinet Mom kept her tea in, which chair Dad claimed at Sunday dinner, and exactly what it meant when her voice dropped half an octave and she said, "We're short again." My parents, Janice and Harold, had never been wealthy, but they had always presented themselves as careful. My mother clipped coupons, reused gift bags until the tape gave out, and could make one rotisserie chicken last 3 meals. My father checked the thermostat like it was connected directly to his retirement account. So when Mom called me 5 years ago sounding like she had been crying, I believed her. "I wasn't going to tell you," she said. "I didn't want to burden you." Dad was in the background. I could hear the television, then the sound went off. "What happened?" I asked. "We're behind on the mortgage," she said. "And your father's medical bills keep coming. We thought we could catch up, but the late fees are eating us alive." Dad got on the phone and said, "We just need breathing room. 3 months, maybe 4. Then we'll be back on track." That weekend I went over. There was a mortgage envelope on the kitchen counter with a red final notice stamp visible through the plastic window. 2 medical envelopes sat beside it. Mom kept touching them while we talked like they were hot. I didn't ask to open them. That was my first mistake. The first transfer was $2,500. It hurt, but it didn't destroy me. I told myself that was what savings were for. Emergencies. Family. Keeping your parents from losing the place where every Thanksgiving and birthday had happened. 3 months passed. Then 4. When I asked if things were getting better, Mom said they had almost caught up, but Dad had another procedure and the deductible had reset. A month later, the water heater supposedly failed. Then the mortgage company added an escrow shortage. Then a prescription wasn't covered. Every crisis sounded specific enough to be real and vague enough that I never saw the full picture. Eventually, Mom said the uncertainty was making her physically sick. "I never know whether we can count on help," she told me. "I lie awake wondering if the bank will take everything." So I set up an automatic transfer for $2,150 on the first business day of every month. The confirmation email arrived before I finished my coffee. At first, I felt relieved each time I saw it. One less thing for my parents to fear. After a year, relief became habit. After 3 years, habit became obligation. By year 5, I barely looked at the confirmation. I just adjusted around it. I delayed replacing a refrigerator that made a grinding noise every night. I canceled a trip I had planned for my 40th birthday because Mom called 2 weeks before the deposit was due and said their property taxes had jumped. I stopped buying small things without doing the math first. I never announced those sacrifices. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted my parents safe. They always thanked me. They just never thanked me for long. "Sweetheart, we hate asking," Mom would say. They always hated asking. They just never hated it enough to stop. My older sister, Whitney, was 43 and had spent most of our lives as the family's polished success story. She had the coordinated furniture, the holiday cards, the dinners where every plate matched. Her husband, Derek, liked expensive watches and posting pictures of steak before he ate it. Whitney talked constantly about discipline. "It's all budgeting," she said once when a cousin complimented her newly remodeled kitchen. People don't like hearing that, but most financial stress comes from not planning. Mom smiled at her like she had just explained compound interest to Congress. "Your sister has always known how to stretch a dollar," she told me. I looked at the new pendant lights hanging over Whitney's island and wondered whether stretching a dollar involved turning it into quartz countertops. Whenever I hinted that Whitney seemed comfortable enough to help our parents, Mom shut it down. "She has children," she would say. "She has a whole household depending on her." Whitney's kids were teenagers by then. Derek worked. Whitney wasn't facing the kind of emergency my parents described every month. Still, I accepted the explanation because that was how our family worked. Whitney had pressure. I had capacity. Her needs were treated as facts. Mine were treated as attitude. The first time I tried to reduce the transfer, I learned exactly how permanent my temporary help had become. I called Mom and explained that I needed to send $1,200 instead of $2,150 that month. I had an unexpected expense and was trying not to pull from savings. There was a long silence. I didn't realize we had become a burden to you, she said. You're not a burden. I'm asking to send less for 1 month. No, I understand. Her voice went flat in the way that meant she absolutely did not understand. I'll figure something out. We always do. Mom, I'm still sending $1,200. I said I understand, Harper. Dad called 2 hours later. Your mother couldn't sleep after that conversation, he said. It's 3 in the afternoon. You know what I mean. No, Dad. I don't. She's scared. She hears you talk about cutting back, and she thinks we're going to lose the house. I didn't say I was cutting you off. She doesn't need this kind of stress. I ended up sending the full amount. That month changed something in me, though I didn't admit it. I started noticing that the money was no longer received as help. It was expected as tribute. Still, I kept paying. Then came Dad's birthday. Mom called 3 days before and sounded unusually defeated. We're not doing anything this year, she said. Money is too tight. We'll eat something simple at home. I can bring dinner over. No, don't make a fuss. It's not a fuss. I'll pick up groceries and cook. We really just want a quiet night. I offered twice more. She refused twice more. On Dad's birthday, I sent him a card and called after dinner. He sounded distracted. What did you eat? I asked. Your mother made soup. There was music in the background. Not television music. Live piano. Then Mom took the phone. We're tired, honey. We'll talk tomorrow. I almost asked where they were, but I stopped myself. Maybe the neighbors were playing music. Maybe someone had dropped by. Maybe I was becoming suspicious because of the reduced transfer argument. At 10:38 that night, my phone notified me that Whitney had added photos to our shared family album. The first picture showed Dad raising a champagne glass. The second showed Mom in a black dress I had never seen, seated beneath a wall of wine bottles. The third showed Whitney, Derek, my parents, and 2 of Whitney's friends around a table in a private dining room. White linens, prix-fixe menus, champagne, individual desserts with gold flakes. Under the picture, Derek had commented, "That room was worth every penny." I stared at the screen. Then I noticed the edge of a receipt beneath Whitney's wine glass. I took screenshots before I even understood why. The photo disappeared about 10 minutes later. Derek's comment vanished with it. But I had the screenshot. I zoomed in until the image blurred, sharpened it, and zoomed again. The reservation line showed Whitney's first name. The total with tip was $3,864. There was a valet stamp at the bottom and the last 4 digits of the card used to pay. I knew those digits. A year earlier, Mom had sent me a photo of a payment confirmation after I asked whether one of Dad's hospital bills had been handled. She had made a point of telling me that the card ending in those 4 digits was connected to an account used strictly for medical expenses. Your father and I don't touch that account for anything else, she had written. We are trying to be responsible. I sat at my kitchen counter with the automatic transfer confirmation still pinned near the top of my inbox. The anger came fast, but it didn't stay hot. Cooled into something more useful. I called Mom the next morning. How was Dad's birthday dinner? Quiet, she said. Like I told you. At home. There was a pause. Yes. I saw the photos. Another pause, longer this time. What photos? The private dining room. The champagne. The receipt. Oh. She sounded annoyed, not caught. Derek paid. The receipt had your medical account card on it. Why were you looking that closely? Because you told me you ate soup at home. We did eat at home later. Mom. Someone treated us. I don't know why you're interrogating me over your father's birthday. First Derek paid. Then someone treated you. Which is it? You are making something ugly out of a family dinner. I want to know whether the money I send you was used for that dinner. Her voice sharpened. After everything we did raising you, you're really going to audit your own mother? I asked one question. Money has changed you. No. Questions changed this conversation. She hung up. Dad called 20 minutes later. Your mother's blood pressure doesn't need this, he said. Was my money used for that dinner? This isn't how family talks. It's how I'm talking now. You're making money more important than people. I'm asking whether I paid for a dinner you lied to me about while telling me the house was in danger. He sighed like I was exhausting him. We did what we thought we had to do. That isn't an answer. Some things are complicated. Then explain them. Let it go, Harper. I did not. Whitney texted me before noon. You've always wanted to make everything about me. I replied, I asked Mom about the dinner, not you. She wrote back immediately. You're obsessed with keeping score. Not everyone's life is as simple as yours. I have a whole household to carry. That sentence sat on my screen for a long time. A whole household to carry. I thought about the refrigerator I hadn't replaced, the trip I had canceled, the monthly transfer that left my account before I had coffee. I thought about my parents' mortgage, medical bills, property taxes, water heater, prescriptions, late fees, and every other emergency I had quietly absorbed. Whitney had a household to carry. Apparently I had too. I didn't argue with her. I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic transfer. The confirmation page asked whether I was sure. Clicked yes. Then I sent my parents a short email. Going forward, I will not send direct transfers. If there is a legitimate bill you want help with, send me the full statement. If I choose to help, I will pay the provider directly. No accusation. No speech. No threat. 3 sentences. Mom called 7 times in 1 hour. Dad left a voicemail. Harper, this is extreme. Your mother is very upset. Call us before you do something you'll regret. Whitney sent another message. Congratulations. You finally got what you wanted. I didn't know what she meant and I didn't ask. By that evening, relatives started contacting me. A cousin wrote, I heard you cut your parents off without warning. That's cold. An aunt by marriage said, your mother is devastated. Then Carmen, one of Mom's cousins, texted me. I don't know what happened, but cutting them off overnight seems harsh. They're almost 70. I answered, ask them what I cut off before you decide. She didn't reply. The next morning, Mom sent a long family email. I wasn't included, but 3 different relatives forwarded pieces of it to me. According to her, I had suddenly withdrawn support because I was resentful of Whitney's family. Mom wrote that she and Dad had never demanded anything and that I had become controlling about money. She also said Whitney had been helping quietly for years. That phrase made my stomach turn. I opened my banking history. At first, I was looking only to total what I had sent. I downloaded 5 years of statements and marked every transfer to my parents' account. The automatic transfers alone came to $129,000. Then I found the extras. $3,000 for the escrow emergency. $1,800 for the water heater. $2,200 for dental work. $4,000 after Mom said the bank had given them 10 days to cure a delinquency. By the time I finished, the total was $141,650. I sat back and stared at it. I had never added it up because the full number would have forced me to ask questions I had spent years avoiding. Then I started building a timeline. I went through emails, text messages, old bank confirmations, and family photos. I didn't need to dig into anyone's private accounts. My parents had sent me enough over the years by accident or convenience, screenshots, payment requests, partial statements, photos of bills, to create a clear picture from my own records. The pattern appeared almost immediately. Mom's urgent mortgage shortage came 4 days before Whitney's 40th birthday dinner. A medical deductible request came the same week Whitney posted the remodeled kitchen. A final notice emergency came 2 days before Whitney and Derek left for a long weekend and posted a photo from a hotel balcony. A request for an extra $1,500 because Dad's medication had changed came the morning a contractor deposit was paid for work at Whitney's house. Any one of those could have been coincidence. All of them were a system. The more I lined up the dates, the less it looked like bad luck and the more it looked like scheduling. I called Carmen. What exactly has Mom been telling everyone? I asked. There was hesitation on the other end. She said they've struggled for years. That part one, no. She said Whitney has done most of the helping because you have your own priorities. I felt something in my chest go still. My own priorities? She made it sound like you contributed occasionally. I sent them more than $140,000. Carmen didn't speak for several seconds. That can't be right. I have every transfer. She lowered her voice. Harper, I'm going to send you something. A few minutes later, an old email chain arrived. The original message was from Mom, sent almost 3 years earlier to a group of relatives after Dad had supposedly had another medical setback. She wrote that Whitney was our quiet angel, and had been helping behind the scenes without wanting recognition. Then she wrote, Harper sends something here and there when she can, but she has always been more independent and private about family matters. The replies were full of praise for Whitney. You raised a wonderful daughter. Whitney has always had such a generous heart. Thank God she is stepping up. Carmen had replied that she could send Mom $500 because she knew Harper had the means to do more but might not understand the urgency. That email hurt worse than the restaurant receipt. The receipt proved they had lied about one dinner. The email proved they had taken my sacrifice, put Whitney's name on it, and then used my silence as evidence that I didn't care. Called Carmen back. I'm sorry, she said before I could speak. I believed her. Did you ever ask me? No. Then that's the part you should be sorry for. You're right. It was the first honest thing anyone in the family had said to me in days. That night I searched my saved voicemails. I had kept several from Mom because her crisis calls often included amounts or deadlines I needed to remember. One message was nearly 4 years old. Sweetheart, we're falling behind again. If you can send the money by Friday, it would take so much pressure off. And please don't mention this to your sister. She has enough on her plate. I don't want her feeling guilty. At the time, I had thought Mom was protecting Whitney from worrying about them. Now I heard it differently. Do not compare stories. Do not ask whether Whitney is helping. Do not tell her where the money comes from. Stay in your lane and keep paying. I transcribed the voicemail. Then I found the bank paper trail. 2 years earlier, Mom had accidentally forwarded me a multi-page bank document when she meant to send only the first page showing a balance. I had never looked past the page she mentioned. Now I did. The account number matched the account receiving my transfers. The later pages showed outgoing payments with partial references. One went to a credit card ending in digits I recognized from a screenshot Whitney had once posted while complaining about a fraudulent charge. Another was labeled with a contractor company, whose yard sign had appeared outside Whitney's house during the kitchen renovation. There was also a transfer authorization form. Dad's signature was at the bottom. Not implied. Not guessed. Signed. I compared the dates to my records. The contractor deposit left my parents' account 2 days after my medical deductible payment arrived. The credit card payment happened the day after an extra transfer Mom requested because the mortgage company was refusing to wait. I still didn't have the whole story, but I had enough to know the story I had been told was false. I sent Dad a photo of his signature. He didn't answer for 6 hours. Then he wrote, "You don't understand the situation." I replied, "Explain it." He wrote, "This should not be handled by text." I replied, "Then send me the mortgage statements, medical bills, and a full accounting of where my money went." He did not respond. Mom left another voicemail that night. "You are making your father and me feel like criminals. We were trying to keep this family together. I hope someday you understand how cruel this is." She never said the records were wrong. Whitney's response was more direct. "Stop digging through things that aren't your business." I answered, "My $141,650 is my business." She didn't reply. Over the next week, I heard from 11 relatives. Some were polite. Some were not. I didn't blast the records into a group email. I didn't post screenshots publicly. I answered each person individually. "I understand you heard one version. Before you call me selfish again, ask Janice how much I sent since the first mortgage emergency." When one cousin said I was being dramatic, I sent him the transfer total and Mom's email praising Whitney. He stopped responding. When an aunt said private family matters should remain private, I told her, "I agree. Mom made them public when she recruited you to shame me." Carmen called twice during that week. Her tone had changed. I asked Janice whether Whitney knew about the money. She said. She wouldn't answer. That is an answer. She also admitted there was debt. What kind of debt? She said it wasn't her story to tell. Interesting. My money was her story to tell. The following Thursday, Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. Her voice was soft again. "We need to heal," she said. "This family has been through enough." "Who will be there?" "Just family." "That is not a number." She sighed. "Carmen, Evelyn, a few cousins, Whitney and Derek. So everyone who has been calling me. We want everyone to remember that we love each other. What do you expect me to do at this dinner? Come with an open heart." That meant apologize. Carmen confirmed it that evening. "Harper, I think she wants you cornered," she said. "She told Evelyn you were coming to explain yourself." "Did she say she was going to explain anything?" "No." "Then I'll bring enough explanation for both of us." I spent Saturday preparing sealed envelopes. I didn't include every private detail I had found. I wasn't interested in exposing medical information or humiliating my parents over unrelated spending. Each packet contained only the evidence connected to the lie they had told about me. A one-page timeline, the transfer total, copies of selected transfer confirmations, the restaurant screenshot, the old email chain praising Whitney, the voicemail transcript, the bank document showing payments tied to Whitney and Dad's signature. I labeled envelopes only for the relatives who had directly accused me. Carmen, Evelyn, 3 cousins, 2 aunts. I printed one extra for Derek because I still didn't know how much he knew. Sunday dinner looked painfully normal. There were casserole dishes on the counter, a bowl of salad no one had touched, paper napkins, and a store-bought pie still in its plastic container. People lingered in the kitchen pretending not to watch the door. Mom sat at the table with a tissue in her hand. Dad was in his usual chair. Whitney sat beside Mom, one hand resting on her shoulder like they were already posing for the sympathetic version of the evening. Derek stood near the sink, staring into his drink. Evelyn, the oldest person there, sat quietly at the far end of the table. She had never been loud, but when she spoke, people usually stopped. Carmen gave me a small nod. Mom looked at the envelopes in my hand. "What are those?" "Information." Her mouth tightened. We were hoping this could be a peaceful dinner. Peace in my family usually meant I apologize for noticing something. I set the envelopes on the chair beside me and took my seat. For the first 20 minutes, everyone pretended to eat. Forks scraped plates. Someone asked about a school fundraiser. One cousin complimented the casserole 3 times. Then Mom folded her napkin and began. "I just want to say that your father and I never wanted money from our children." I almost laughed, but I did not. "We wanted to know our daughters cared," she continued. "That's all. And it has broken my heart to see Harper change like this." A few people looked at me. Dad kept his eyes on his plate. Mom dabbed her eyes with the tissue. "We have made mistakes. Every parent does. But cutting off your elderly parents without warning." "I gave you written terms for future help," I said. She raised her hand. "Please let me finish." Whitney leaned forward. "This is breaking Mom's heart, Harper. You're tearing the family apart over resentment." "Resentment about what?" She gave me a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know what?" One of my cousins cleared his throat. "Your parents raised you. Maybe gratitude should matter more than receipts." That was the line Mom had been waiting for. She lowered her eyes and squeezed the tissue. I reached for the envelopes. "You're right," I said. "This is about family. So let's talk about who has actually been carrying this family." The room went still. I handed Carmen her envelope first. Then Evelyn. Then the relatives who had contacted me. Mom's face changed. "Harper, don't." I continued passing them out. "What is this?" one cousin asked. "The version with dates." Paper slid from envelopes. People began reading. I stayed seated. 5 years ago, Mom and Dad told me they were behind on the mortgage and overwhelmed by medical bills. They said they needed help for 3 or 4 months. I sent money. Then I set up an automatic transfer of $2,150 every month. Carmen looked up even though she already knew the total. "The automatic transfers came to $129,000, I said. "With extra emergency requests, I sent $141,650. Someone whispered, Jesus. Mom shook her head. You don't have to say the number like that. How should I say it? It makes it sound accurate. Dad finally looked at me. Harper. I turned to the restaurant screenshot. Last week, Mom told me they were too broke to celebrate Dad's birthday and were eating soup at home. That night, Whitney accidentally posted photos from a private dining room. The dinner cost $3,864. The card used to pay was tied to the account Mom told me was reserved for medical bills. Derek looked at Whitney. You said your parents covered that, he said. Whitney's shoulders went rigid. They did. With what money? She didn't answer. I held up the timeline. The dinner was not the only issue. Requests for mortgage and medical emergencies repeatedly came right before payments connected to Whitney's expenses. A contractor deposit for her kitchen left my parents' account 2 days after I sent extra money for Dad's medical deductible. Whitney turned toward me. You have no idea what that payment was for. The contractor's name is on the transaction. That could have been reimbursement. Then show the reimbursement. She looked away. I continued. A payment to Whitney's credit card left the account the day after Mom told me the mortgage company would not wait. Dad signed the transfer authorization. Dad's face went gray. One of the cousins flipped to the page with his signature. Harold, is this yours? Dad rubbed his forehead. This is not the place. Mom began crying. How could you humiliate your mother like this? I looked at her. No, you let them humiliate me with a lie. I'm correcting the record with receipts. She pressed the tissue to her mouth. We were trying to help your sister. By telling me the bank was taking your house? You don't understand what she was going through. Then explain it. Dad spoke quietly. Some things should stay private. I turned to him. It was inside the family when you asked me for money. It was inside the family when everyone judged me. It stays inside the family now that the truth is here. Carmen was reading the old email chain. Her face tightened. Janice, you told us Whitney was helping quietly. She was helping. With Harper's money? No. The answer came too fast. Carmen looked directly at her. Did Whitney know Harper was the one paying? Mom froze. Whitney stared at the table. Derek looked from one of them to the other. Evelyn spoke for the first time. Answer her, Janice. Mom twisted the tissue in her hands. She knew Harper helped sometimes. Sometimes, I said. I paid every month for 5 years. I did not give her your bank statements. That wasn't the question. Carmen repeated it. Did Whitney know Harper's money was being used for her debt? Whitney pushed back from the table. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I stole from her. Sit down, Derek said. She looked at him. Excuse me. You told me your parents were helping us from an investment account. Whitney's face flushed. They were. Dad closed his eyes. Evelyn said, Harold. He opened them again. For once he could not hide behind Mom's voice. Whitney had losses, he said. What kind of losses? Carmen asked. Dad looked at Whitney, then at the table. She put money into a business arrangement that failed. Some of it was money set aside for a family obligation. Then there were credit cards. We tried to keep things from collapsing. Whitney snapped. You make it sound like I gambled it away. I said it failed, Dad replied. Mom turned on him. You did not have to say any of that. He had to say something, I said. You spent 5 years saying nothing while taking my money. Mom's tears stopped. Her expression hardened. Your sister was drowning. So you held me underwater and called it family? The room went silent. Whitney folded her arms. You've always hated that Mom and Dad supported me. I hated being lied to. I hated being told you were the one helping them, while they were using my money to protect you. I never asked them to tell people that. You knew they were taking money from me. I knew you helped. You knew enough to stay quiet while relatives called you generous and called me selfish. She looked toward Mom. That was all the confirmation anyone needed. Derek stepped away from the sink. I knew there was debt, he said. I knew her parents had helped with some payments. I did not know the money was coming from Harper. Whitney stared at him. You don't need to defend yourself. I'm not. I'm explaining what I knew. Mom leaned toward me. We were trying to keep your sister's life from falling apart. She has children. She has responsibilities. And I was useful because I didn't? That's not what I said. It's what you did. One of the aunts who had called me cold closed her envelope. Janice, you told me Harper had the money but wouldn't help. Mom looked offended. I said she could be distant. You said Whitney was paying most of the bills. She was contributing in other ways. What ways? Carmen asked. Mom's eyes moved around the table, searching for someone willing to rescue her. No one did. Evelyn placed both hands on the table. A child who was deceived is not ungrateful for closing her wallet, she said. Mom looked at her. You don't know everything. I know enough. Family does not mean one person pays while another person gets praised. Evelyn's voice never rose. Didn't need to. Dad stared down at his hands. Whitney's eyes filled, but her anger stayed stronger than her shame. You didn't have to do this in front of everyone, she told me. You were fine with everyone judging me in front of everyone. That was Mom. And you corrected her when? She had no answer. I gathered the remaining pages and placed them in front of me. I'm going to make this very simple, I said. There will be no more monthly transfers. If Mom or Dad has a legitimate bill and wants help, they can send me the full statement. I may choose to pay the provider directly. I will not send cash. Mom scoffed. So now we have to beg for your approval? No. You have to stop lying if you want my participation. I looked at Dad. I will not pay anything related to Whitney's debt. Not $1. He nodded once. I turned to Whitney. If you want a relationship with me, you will acknowledge what happened. Not that Mom handled it badly. Not that I embarrassed you. You will acknowledge that you benefited from money taken from me under false pretenses and accepted praise that belonged to me. Her jaw tightened. And then what? You want me to pay you back $100,000. I want a real accounting and a repayment plan based on what actually went to you. That's impossible. So is pretending this never happened. Mom shook her head. You're destroying this family over money. I stopped paying because I finally learned what I was paying for. Then I addressed the table. Anyone who calls me selfish after tonight will receive the same timeline. I will not argue about Mom's version anymore. The records are the records. Carmen spoke first. I owe you an apology. I looked at her. Yes. She nodded, accepting it. I judged you without asking. I was wrong. One cousin muttered that the dinner still felt too public. I said, then next time don't participate in a public ambush. He looked down. The aunt who had criticized me said nothing, but she slid Mom's email chain across the table as if it had become dirty. Dad finally spoke. We should have told you. You should have asked me, I said. You should have given me the choice. We thought you would say no. That is why you lied. Mom stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor. I cannot sit here and be attacked in my own home. No one stopped her when she left the room. That was new. Usually 3 people would have followed her, comforted her, and turned her exit into proof that someone else had gone too far. This time people stayed seated. Dad remained at the table, looking older than he had an hour earlier. Not ruined, not helpless, just exposed. Whitney stood next. I'm not doing this. Derek did not move with her. She stared at him. Are you coming? In a minute. She left alone. The dinner didn't end with hugs or dramatic apologies. It ended the way real family disasters often do. People carried half-full plates into the kitchen, whispered near the sink, and avoided eye contact while deciding which version of themselves they could live with. Carmen helped me gather the extra pages. You okay? She asked. No, I said. But I will be. Evelyn touched my arm on her way out. You were quiet too long, she said. I thought quiet kept the peace. No. It kept the lie comfortable. That night, Mom left a 6-minute voicemail. The first 30 seconds sounded like an apology. I'm sorry you felt misled. Then she spent 5 minutes explaining how humiliating it had been to have her financial problems discussed in front of relatives. She said I had made her look dishonest. She said Evelyn had no right to judge. She said Carmen had always enjoyed drama. She never apologized for taking my money. She never apologized for giving Whitney credit. She never said the mortgage story had been true. I saved the voicemail but didn't answer. Dad sent one text the next morning. I should have spoken sooner. I replied, yes, you should have. A few hours later he wrote, I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, but it was the first sentence from him that didn't contain an excuse. Whitney waited 3 days. Then she sent, this has gone too far. We're sisters. Can we just start over and move forward without making everything about money? I read it twice. Then I answered, we can move forward after you tell the truth about what happened and provide an accounting of what my money covered. Moving forward is not the same as pretending. She did not respond. Derek contacted me separately. He said he had reviewed some of their finances and believed my parents had covered far more of Whitney's debt than he had known. He didn't ask me to forgive her. He didn't defend himself beyond saying he should have asked more questions. I told him I was not discussing Whitney with him behind her back. That boundary surprised even me. For years, my family had trained me to confuse access with closeness. Everyone was allowed into everyone else's business when it helped control the story. I was done participating in that too. Over the next month, 4 relatives apologized. 2 said I had been right but should have kept the evidence private. 1 never contacted me again. Carmen called my parents and asked for her $500 contribution back after learning it had been solicited under the same false story. Mom called that cruel. Evelyn told her, you keep using that word whenever someone stops cooperating. My parents didn't lose their house. The first month without my transfer, they cut several expenses and met with a financial counselor recommended by a relative. Dad eventually sent me proof that the mortgage was current. The old red final notice I had seen years earlier had been real, but it had not represented a permanent crisis. They had recovered much earlier than they claimed and kept using the same fear because it worked. That detail mattered to me. They had needed help once. Then they had learned that my fear was renewable. Whitney and Derek sold some expensive furniture, canceled a planned trip, and began sorting out their debt. I heard through Carmen that the kitchen renovation had never been fully paid off. I didn't celebrate any of that. I didn't need them ruined. I needed their emergencies to stop living in my bank account. The first morning of the next month, I woke up before my alarm and reached for my phone. For 5 years there had been a transfer confirmation waiting for me. This time there was nothing. The $2,150 was still in my account. I expected guilt. Instead I felt space. I replaced the refrigerator. I rebooked the trip I had canceled for my 40th birthday, not as some grand act of revenge, but because I could. I stopped checking my phone every time Mom called. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I let it ring and listened later. When she asked for help with a legitimate insurance bill 2 months after the dinner, she sent the complete statement without being prompted. I paid a portion directly to the provider. She didn't like the process. That was not my problem. Dad began calling me occasionally without asking for money. Our conversations were awkward and short. I didn't pretend trust had returned just because he had finally admitted he failed me. Whitney never sent the accounting. We remained distant. I didn't cut off every family member, and I didn't forgive everyone on a schedule that made them comfortable. I stopped measuring my decisions by whether Mom cried, Dad sounded disappointed, or Whitney accused me of jealousy. For the first time, I understood that my silence had never kept us together. It had only made me easier to use. I didn't stop loving my family. I stopped funding the version of them that only existed when I kept my mouth shut. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.